of Kittens and Broken Things, Chapter 53.
Garrus watched Kara move through the next 2 days, kaleidoscopic perfection of her having tailored herself to each moment. She was a warm, sweet, and vulnerable lover with soft skin and melted green eyes, expressing her giving nature in every line and gesture, pressed to plate, wishing to be nowhere else. She was a reserved and sedate, elegant and gracious addition to the Vicarian clan. Garrus suspected that she had learned everything she could of Turian custom. She charmed everyone, bearing almost no Turian ideals, as she said, but creating a moment where human ideals or human rarity found her place. With his mother's joyous welcome before cameras, his father's reserved but possibly genuine, possibly manufactured pride, Solana's repressed enthusiasm and curiosity setting the stage. Kara was joyous, reserved, and enthusiastic in perfect turns, like a dancer. Garrus was charmed and set off balance, knowing he was good at social and political maneuvering, but the transformation of needed guile from Kara to Shepard, once again in a new setting. He could almost believe she'd played him every moment of their lives, and this was the true Kara. She was that good. He was that impressed. He was that scared. After discussion with Karen, Yesed was woken first, Kara sitting at his bedside, Garrus standing behind her with his hand on her shoulder. Kara kept her hand and arm carefully not touching Yesed, though he had faith the real Kara wanted to be gripping his hand when he awoke. Her face was as good as Karen's poker face, and Garrus tried to do the same, though his heart was pounding hard enough he didn't think he'd be able to hear anything else. Kara here also was tuned perfectly, Garrus almost wanting to believe she was this easy and this steady, because that was less painful than the fact that each of these performances was tearing chunks out of her internally, as she had to be someone else when what she wanted to do was hide and cry. Spirits. He wanted to stand in front of her and shield her from it all, but she wouldn't allow it. She'd made her concession regarding Sinar, and that was all she'd grant. She turned to sharp focus on practical things she could address. Spending enough time in bed with her bondmate to set him at ease, public introduction to her family and her internal world was dissolved in apprehension, facing the boy whose leg and lung she had cost him, and whose life she had saved and risked. Garrus had asked her in reverie, bodies joined and his talon tips tracing around her eyes, with the inherent lack of caution brought by the state. A curious foray into the precise machinations behind the green eyes he was gazing into. Which one of you is real? She hadn't pretended to misunderstand the question. Her fingers caught and twined with his, an answering lack of caution.
Every me loves you. There are people I have to be, but when I'm with you, I get to be someone I want to be. That isn't even me when I'm alone, and maybe I'm not real until I'm with you. This is who I want to be most real. But I need you for that. I need to be able to love you, to be the most real I can be.
He understood because it was true in a metaphoric and practical way for himself. Who would Vicarian be without Shepard, without Fanning? He was most real when he was with her. She had made him aspire to be his best self. At least at the time he had understood it perfectly, because that's what reverie did. Out of reverie it was a cautionary tale of her malleability to circumstance, and how he was responsible for shaping her world, inner and outer, and how much power and responsibility that gave him. Now Yesed would determine her real in many ways. Garrus had wanted to coach him, shield her, but she wouldn't allow it. Kara told Yesed softly in words he was certain had been parsed, chosen, rehearsed.
Welcome back. The lung transplant went brilliantly. Your father is recovering, still sleeping. We woke you first. He's fine. Your lungs are fine. With your surgery there was a complication, and you suffered a clot to your thigh, and they could not recover your limb. You've lost your right leg below the hip. I'm so glad you're both alive, and I'm so sorry about your leg. You can get a prosthetic and therapy here at the hospital.
She didn't try to mitigate the blow or assure him that all would be well. Facts were given and conclusions left open to the boy's interpretation. Gratitude and shock lit Yased's face, and then his eyes closed. Yased's shoulders slumped, and then, in an outrush of breath, he said,
Keep my dad asleep.
Garrus's brow plate shot up, but he imagined Kara kept her poker face. It wasn't poker for her life face, her non-real face. The face she had to make real to save lives, or take them. Yased waved a hand.
I don't... Breathe. Take your time. If you want to think for a little while... I don't need to think. I know. I need... Don't wake him up. Kara, he's in love with you. I made him do this, but...
Kara reached out her hand and took Yased's, who clung to her. Garrus knew that feeling, imagining Kara's anchoring green in the storm of Yased's emotions and conclusions of consequence. She said through what must have been a smile on her face,
Yased, look at me. I know he's in love with me. Garrus knows he's in love with me. I'm in love with him also, in my way. I also love you. You're both family. We'll get through this together.
Yased looked at her as though she did not comprehend, but must have been relieved at what he saw there.
Let me tell him. Don't wake him up yet. Let me... All right. But please remember, I provided for this to happen. I'm a little sick of all you heroes, you know. It's my damn leg.
Garrus barked a laugh he couldn't help, and then Kara lowered her head, shoulders shaking with nervous laughter and what was obviously relief.
Yes, it is, or was, and will be again, your leg. I'll help any way I can.
Garrus took exception to the pronoun. We'll help any way we can. Yased's hand lowered. He squeezed Kara's hand and then retrieved his own hand, gripped his hands together.
Yeah, I get that. I think you guys have done enough for now. He's really going to be okay?
Kara retrieved her hands graciously.
He's going to be better than okay.
Yased's hand tentatively reached down to the void below his hip where his leg had been. Yased looked bleak, determined, and he looked only like himself, not what his mother must have looked like, not what his father looked like, and Garrus thought flashing in his eyes he saw Kara's influence for a second. Then he looked like himself, a traumatized and struggling boy in a hospital bed, missing something, but determined not to lose something else.
Give me 2 hours. Then let me be there when he wakes up. I'll talk to him.
He looked again guiltily at Garrus, then Kara, then back to the ceiling.
Alone.
Kara nodded, stood, and leaned over to hug him, their hands to the back of each other's head, an embrace of passing understanding. She kissed his forehead and withdrew, the expression of softening affection on Yased's face then hardening back to bleak determination before they turned to leave, consult Karen, and let the boy be on his own hero. Karen agreed the delay was medically negligible, allowed the 2 hours as prudent to allow Yased to reach equilibrium without having to mention the word homicide or any other word with side at the end. The chunks torn from her were apparent, when his cool and calm Kara dissolved into sobs as soon as they crossed over the threshold into their private apartments on the Madless, there to wait and console each other as they could, helpless again to control the outside world. They were near guilty to have such comfort and love in each other, but nowhere near giving up a moment of it.
Senar's immediate wash of emotion upon waking up was disappointment. He had hoped upon closing his eyes and being quiescently obedient, that as a consequence and poetic irony, he would die on the table. That was what surrender had meant to him, symbolically and theoretically, literally. His wish had not become the truth. His second wash of emotion was gratitude upon seeing Yosed's face at the side of his bed. Yosed was in a mobility chair, looking down at him, their hands held. Yosed smiled and said, "Welcome back." Senar smiled at him. "You are well?" Yosed nodded and said, "Well enough. Lung transplant went well for both of us, but I lost my leg to a blood clot." Then the third wash of emotion began with a resumed surge of reinforced disappointment at the lack of his own death or complication, gratitude that Yosed had lived, and then fury. He was familiar with disappointment, proximity to but not the right to his own death, fate's cruelty and responsibility for consequences. He had chosen to sink beneath the sand before he had surrendered, and he remained there, coiled and cold, and of his chosen seeming, not at all of his inherent nature. The gods deserved his scorn, and they would receive that as they did after Erica was taken and tortured. Fate and Senar were not on respectful terms. He was a father, and wished to be a deserving father. Therefore, Yosed would receive what was asked. Yosed was here alone, maimed, the etched lines of his face showing determination and fear. Fear of what Senar would do, and to whom. With the ease of water following gravity's call, he gave all appearance, all seeming of what was demanded of him, acceptance and forgiveness. The duty to conform to authority's demand was more familiar to him than his own will. Perhaps he would some day make duty and fatherhood something real. At the moment he could only grant the appearance. Senar's voice was not his own, but rarely had been in his life. His will was not his own, but that was familiar and, in a way, as alluring as sinking to battle sleep. He said with the disconnected sense of self that was himself, "He said, all that matters to me is that you are well and you are here. You will get a new leg, and I will stay with you and be your legs until you walk on your own and grow tired of my interference." Yosed swallowed, narrowed his eyes, and said, "You're not mad? I mean, that you're breathing is all that matters to me, but you're—" "I am well. You will be well. Nothing else matters." "Dad, I'm not I'm not blind. Don't be mad at her." As Senar did not and would not discuss Kara at all with his son, he redirected the conversation. "Mad at her? Dr. Shakwas? Did something happen during the surgery? Was some error made?" He allowed just enough anger to thread his voice. Yosed shook his head quickly. "No, no, I mean Commander Shepard. Kara." Senar appeared to relax slightly, and then asked with some bewilderment, "Why would I be angry at Commander Shepard?" "Because of her. We are both alive. Because of her we are here together." "I'm not stupid or blind. You were angry that we did this before I lost my leg. You're in love with her." Senar's face clouded with confusion, and then the dawning of an idea that had not at all occurred to the man he must seem to be. "The sands are deep, my son, and you will not stumble there and become lost. I shall draw you a map." "Yes, Ed, Please, you are mistaken. I am, and have, always been in love with your mother. That doesn't mean you can't also be in love with her. That is true, but not truth. I admire her. I do love her, in my way, but perhaps you see what is in your heart? Are you not enamored of Commander Shepard yourself? It would be understandable if you were, but do not confuse my heart with yours. I know my path. It is at your mother's side at the shores. Yosette's eyes were cast into simple confusion, defensive thought, and self-reflection. What? No, I'm not. But there was enough affection and care there to create enough doubt, enough reason, enough distraction. Yosette took what was offered, what was needed. Assurance, peace, calm. Sonar squeezed Yosette's hand and said in conspiratorial, hushed tone, "It does not matter for either of us. Your mother awaits me. Kara is with Garrus, and regardless of any feelings of yours, she will remain our family. I will say nothing to her or Garrus of any affection you might carry for her other than familial. I promise you." Yosette's eyes closed on disoriented confusion and a deeply drawn breath. He sat suspended, trying to navigate. He let out the breath in a patient exhale, finding his fight countered and his path without the confirmation he sought. He allowed it to drop, as intended. Sonar would feel satisfied if it were not for the rage and the cold, things that would not touch his son. Yosette opened his eyes and said, "Are you okay? Are you in any pain?" Sonar thought only briefly, "I am pain," but said, reassuringly, which was true, no physical pain permitted under Dr. Chakwas' careful watch, "No, I am not in pain. My breath comes easy, and all is well. Yosette, thank you. Thank you for your lung, and for risking your life again to reach me. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your loyalty. I hope someday to deserve your sacrifice." He did not speak to or of Erica, sundered from her in many ways, unwilling to expose her to the lies he told their son, as he spun reassuring deceptions, as he chose truths to solidify from smoke. All that filled the dark places was being bound to Kara in more depth, more choices made, more debt. In some ways a satisfaction that would not be expressed in Yosette's presence or sphere of comprehension, ever. Manipar might begin with even footing. Now any law of what humans term karma would draw her to him. That is why the balance would never, ever be zero, and why he would not forgive. She must face him. In all things, she must face him, and he would accept no less. Yosette's smile was beaming as he said, "Just keep breathing, Dad. That's what I want." "Then that is what I shall do for you. You will walk again. You will dance again, Yosette. We will make that true."
Garrus left her sleeping, headed back to the hospital after giving Yosette time to speak to his father. Rehab therapy would begin for both of them, more extensive for Yosette. Although Kara agreed not to speak directly to Sonar, Garrus had things to relay on his own, things from her, things from him, things from them. Checking in with Yosette, the boy seemed vaguely bewildered and with the echo of guilt of looking at Garrus as though he'd come to wrong conclusions. Yosette said,
He seems fine. I think I was wrong. There wasn't anything to worry about.
I'm glad that's the case. Do you have everything you need?
Yeah, I'm headed toward rehab. Dad will stay with me. We're good.
You'll let me know if you need anything?
Yeah, seems you've got everything covered. Thank you, sir.
Garrus.
Thank you, Garrus.
You're welcome, you said. Here's my hope for a fast recovery. Well, now he was confused. That seemed to be standard. Keeping in mind Sonar was capable of forgiveness and wrath and everything in between, he should be grateful for the reminder that he had no idea what was coming. He was not grateful. Entering Sonar's room, the man was reclining, relaxed and seemingly contemplative, his dark eyes raising from watching the door, likely at the height of Kara's head, slowly accepting that instead the visitor was Garrus. The Drell blinked slowly, and Garrus asked politely, "How are you feeling?" A raised brow ridge and a pointed rejoinder.
Are you certain you wish to know my feelings, Garrus?
About your lungs, certainly.
My lungs, my bargained and paid for lungs are well, so I hear. My breath is easy.
Glad to hear it.
Where is she?
Not here.
I see. Has she done herself harm? Is she well?
No. Or, yes. She's done herself harm. She'd rather have given up her own limbs and her own lungs, and maybe if left with a dull knife for too long, she'd do that herself. I'd rather not be away from her for long.
Whose idea was it for Yased to wake me?
It was his.
And who provided him with that choice? Was she there for him?
I wouldn't allow her to wake you. She was there for Yased. He asked to be the one who woke you.
So my son was placed in the position of absorbing the shock and the loss of his limb and managing his father's temper immediately upon waking?
Yes, but he would have had to deal with the loss of his limb either way, and your temper is not to be underestimated. Something that was foremost in 3 minds, enough for all of us to be concerned, and for us to not argue with Yased when he chose what it was he wanted to do without us prompting him.
Kara does not need to be protected from me. She needs to be protected by me. She has done herself harm. Send her to me.
Garrus hesitated. He still had enough absolutely not to go a few rounds. She'd said Sonar had to ask. He'd asked. He couldn't very well ask, "Do you intend to strangle my bondmate?" Because there was no evidence of that. But there was never any evidence at any crime scene left by this man. He said slowly, "And what will you say to her?"
Whatever is appropriate to thank her and protect her.
I'm really fucking sick of appropriate from you.
You would prefer inappropriate? Garrus, has your bondmate ever explained Panifa to you?
Only that she kicked my ass at it.
As she has, and will mine. One of the key mechanics of the game is hijacking. She hijacked my son, and well, now I live a longer life and he has a father. Does she not deserve thanks for arranging for that?
And what does that have to do with Panifa?
Because there are games, and those games have rules, and she is a master of the game. If you wish to place yourself on the board as a player, you will find yourself a piece in short order. Denied the opportunity to thank her appropriately, shall I instead turn my attention to you? She turned her attention to my son. She follows her own rules, rules I understand. I also understand your rules, which are more generous in terms of moral ambiguity. She works with integrity and purpose. You are more selfish, and that can be arranged. Are you certain you know what I am after, Garrus? You believe I covet your bondmate for her power and her prestige. Perhaps I can be convinced to covet you instead. Hijack you as fully as she has hijacked my son. It was you, in fact, that saved his life. You that provided his home, his family, his future. Perhaps you are a greater prize than she. It would certainly be easier.
What in actual fuck are you talking about?
By her rules, love is a gift, forgiveness is assured, sacrifice is implied. I have wished to learn her rules, and I have. I have treated her according to those rules and will continue to do so. I will not take her, as she does not take her rules. My bond is to her will. You, on the other hand, you simply took her. By your rules, that would be a much simpler path to taking what she loves, if that is what you believe I want. Amoris has certainly not been swayed by any of Kara's achievements or virtues. He remains fully your man. Perhaps I should take his cue. Do the same. Find a convenient wall behind you and see if reverie and bond can be broken by venom. I believe they could be. If I wished her dead, she would be dead. If I wished you dead, or mine, you would be those things.
What you want is for her to owe you.
And she does. Now even more than she has at any other time. She has given me much. I am a spectre. I am healthy. My son will recover. I will return to the Normandy.
Walk away. Stay with Yesed.
Block my path to Kara, and see what comes of that, Garrus. She is in no danger, for she follows her nature, and her nature is understood. I understand you as well. You are less of a challenge, but if you must be distracting, then prepare to be a distraction. You fear my unpredictability and my temper for good reason. I doubt very much that Kara has asked you to ask me to walk away. She needs me.
No. Walking away is my idea, and I stand behind its merits. She doesn't need this.
She will not get this, Garrus. Only you. I can make an allowance for blundering, and I can and will give you what is considered to be fair warning among the honest. You are at least honest, and I can give you that.
And you expect me to trust you?
You have no choice. She owes me. She needs me. Not in the way you think, but in a way she understands and I understand. If I know my Lassam, she agreed to allow you to speak to me, but she has not said she would not see me. I imagine I must ask. So I asked you, and I will ask again. Send her to me. Now. We will let it stand that you delivered a message, and I granted my reply. I will wait until you deliver that message, and we will see how long it takes her to come to me. I imagine it will be swift. Beyond that, if you wish to set yourself between us, then be prepared for an introduction to Pawn Eva. I will find my own time frame and ask in my own way that she attend. Your presence is no longer required and is not required. She will come, and she will come alone, and she will leave when she wishes to leave, under her own will, as has always been the case. If you cannot credit my trust, then at least credit my pride. I do not wish to steal your bondmate. She must earn me. In fact, she may need to beg me for the right to stand by my side if it comes to that, but your bondmate will not be stolen from you with whispers and kisses. Her will stays whole, and as long as you live, as long as you do not blunder with her as spectacularly as you have right now. She is yours. Your will, on the other hand, is negotiable if you press me. You are an attractive man, Garrus. I would certainly enjoy taking you from her as you took her from herself. If you wish to ask which man here overrode her will and did not ask her for her consent, much less waited until she begged for the right, look at yourself perhaps more closely before you accuse me of what you fear, based on what you know you did. I am not you. You should perhaps be grateful for that in ways you have not previously appreciated.
I'm more and more convinced this was not at all a blunder.
Perhaps you should leave before I become more convinced that it was.
Feel better?
I shall. And soon.
You're an attractive guy too, Sonar. Maybe I'm looking forward to it. I'd love to see you try to explain that one to her. She saved your life and gives you back your son. You repay her by seducing her bondmate. That sounds like she'd think that was fair. You've got a better shot at me than her, though, clearly. She would never beg you. You've got a great fantasy life, though.
If you wish to provoke me, I find myself uninspired and advised to rest. Perhaps later.
That's fine, and I'd advise further rest. Don't make it about me. Much as that sounds like fun, don't get me wrong. No, I really don't want to play. I don't have to play. I'm a messenger informing you that the move she was persuaded to make by your son and by me was to not make a move. I'm convinced we were right. It's true that only you can reassure her, protect her from your own worst intentions. Are you going to? Or will you use this excuse to hurt her because you can't do anything else and you hate helplessness? Do not let her provoke you into striking. Believe it or not, I've been trying to protect you as well from making a mistake that you would regret. We all know you are not inclined to thank her, even if you owe her the breath you might use to manipulate her guilt into debt. Despite your obvious desire, which you've somehow convinced your son doesn't exist, and congratulations on that, you've done her and me a lot of good. My Ava has also advised me I can't kill you. You deserve to not be ambushed by her guilt when you first woke up. We thought it was best that you see your son awake and without brain damage, as that would be your first concern. She chose to make it about both of you and not about her, and that was also a good move, her best move. It's clear you've got your wits. This is about her willing to die for you, and what she feels she's cost you, for what you both know she cost you. Something I can't change, but I can ask you to not make it worse. If you don't want to count any debt to her as valid, but all her debts to you magnified, that's not by her rules. Didn't you say forgiveness was implied? Don't make her pay, please. If you pride yourself so much by knowing and abiding by her rules, and will, follow them.
As you wish.
Thank you. Garrus left at that, oddly reassured and again knowing he'd been played, and just like with Kara, it didn't matter. What was going to happen, and he'd done all he could to protect her. She was going to walk in on whatever Sonar planned. He went back to the Madless, found her pacing, opened his arms, and she ran to him. He said, "He asked to see you. The rest was weird."
Weird how?
Apparently he's convinced you said that he's not in love with you.
Well, that's good.
Also, he threatened to kiss me if I didn't get out of his way.
You what?
No, seriously. He said he'd seduce me like you hijacked his son.
That man is good with the creative threat.
You're not worried?
It doesn't really suit his end goal. He's just trying to unsettle you.
Consider me unsettled and oddly turned on.
Right?
He's probably got a timer. He said you'd show up fast.
He's right. If you'll let me go.
Oh yeah, I'm letting you go. Whatever he has planned, I have no idea. But he says you need him to protect you.
In this case? Yeah.
Go. Unsettle me when you get back.
Yes, sir.